Welcome to the Stumble Across podcast. This is the podcast where I basically stumble across someone online, invite them for a chat, and usually with me knowing very little about them. So this is completely unprepared, unfiltered, and it can lead to uncovering some of the best stories. In this episode, I stumble across Brian Nash. I discover how as a kid he grew up in army camps with members of his family fighting war. He was constantly having to move house, new friends, new schools, new life each time. And we discuss our family trees and how much work actually goes in to finding your family that you didn't even know existed.
I'm from, I live in a little community in Prince Edward Island called Middleton.
I see the flag behind you.
Yes, that is in Canada.
Yeah. Just for the people who aren't watching the video podcast, okay, first of all, obviously, the aim of this podcast is I know absolutely nothing about the person who's coming on. Tell me something interesting about yourself, first of all.
I try to be humble, so it's hard to come up with those things sometimes. As I pointed out, I'm in Canada, but if you ask me where I was from in Canada, at one point in my life, I would probably ask you to name a year, because I lived across Canada in my early life, and before I moved here 17 years ago, the longest I ever lived in one house was 4.5, 5 years.
Did you not find that was such a stressful thing? I mean, we moved house recently, about 6 months ago, and honestly, I would never do it again.
Yeah, well, my father was in the Canadian military, so so we wound up moving every three years usually.
Right.
So when I got to be a little older, it got to be hard because I lived on a military base. My friends that I went to school with from the base, they weren't long-term friendships, because you have either I would be moving after they move there, or they'd be moving probably shortly. So I didn't have a lot of friends that I would say that were long-term in my life until kind of later. I do have some friends from that time. I actually been able to catch up and, sort of renew friendships on Facebook, but nothing deep. That was probably the hardest thing growing up doing that.
So life on the road, really?
Yeah. But also another thing is, every couple of years I could basically start fresh. So nobody knew me.
There's a lot of people who would actually like that benefit. Just start afresh, and we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah, as a teenager, especially, I got to, start doing different things, change my personality, but just change how I was known by people.
Yeah. Almost have a rehearsrsal with one, and then if that doesn't go well, we can wipe the slate. Yeah,
it was sort of like that.
And what was it like, kind of growing up in that environment?
It was interesting. Like I said, the changing friends quite frequently. I mean, I wouldn't change it for the world now, because I did get to experience just a lot of Canada. My father, we never went overseas, but I got to see a lot of my country, which was nice. I had a lot of different influences, and and it did shape a lot of the way I think now as an adult, understanding. I can relate to people from different regions of Canada probably a lot better than other people.
And did you kind of follow in his footsteps then?
No, I didn't.
No? Right.
My father was in the military. My mother's father had been in the war. He served in World War II, and then my brother is retired from the Navy recently. But no, I didn't follow in their footsteps. Though my first paying job was actually working. Well, my first paying job was working for the Department of National Defense when I was in high school, and on our base I ran. In grade 12, I moved to a really small community. So small, I was the only person from my community. It was in grade 12. the grade 12 is our graduating year here in Canada.
Right.
And so the high school I went to, that was multiple people. Obviously, it wasn't just the people from the base, but I was the only person on the base. But there was a little summer program. I basically by default ran that my summer, the summer there before university. But my first real job, sort of after university, I actually was working for the Department of National Defence for a few months.
Before we kind of go on to what you did then, kind of being in that environment, everything was obviously in a base, right? So everything is within that one thing.
Yeah, everything, like, it depends on the base, and some bases were bigger than the others. Some bases, when I lived in Ottawa, our base was smack down. Well, now it's in pretty much the middle of suburbia, but I wound up doing a lot of things out of the base. Especially I was at that age where I could get on a city bus, and take myself downtown and just hang out, so yeah, it really depended on where it was. Like I said, that was in a large city, or small little tiny community, like I was in grade 12.
So I'm guessing when I'm saying, it must be stressful moving house, I guess if you're doing that all the time, you don't have the amount of things that everyone else has to move. You're not doing that.
You'd think that, but not with my mom.
Right.
But it didn't bother me because I didn't really have much to do with that part. And the good thing about my dad being in the military, they had movers come in, they did everything for us. So
where did you go then? So obviously you kind of cut your ties then with military. Yeah, I guess as a job anyway.
As a job.
Yeah.
I actually did. Kind of floated around for a year or two. I want to say that was 1991, 1992. 1992, I don't really remember, a lot of significant things in my life, because I was unemployed, looking for a job, but living on unemployment, making more money than some of my friends that had jobs. So I wasn't anxious to go spend a lot of time at the pub. And I, sort of realized that studying medieval history, though history is something I love and actually still a very important part of my life, it just wasn't going to be the career I thought. So I wound up taking some business courses, some computer courses, had various careers in my life. I worked professionally as a political organizer, worked for a political party for a number of years, ran political campaigns. Then about 20 years ago, I started doing technical support. And currently I work as a technical and customer support manager for a company that serves multiple clients throughout the world. Something I really enjoy. I've always had a love for helping people. So it's something that I get quite a bit of job satisfaction in that, knowing that I've done something to help people. My current role, I'm helping my employees to try to be better, make the best, utilize their skills to their full potential.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, not to get too political, but if you're being behind all of that, I guess that was a very stressful experience if you're the one that's creating all those campaigns.
It was, because part of it was that I got really tired of the internal politics of politics. I love politics. I watch politics and enjoyed it almost as a sport. But some of the background stuff.
I guess it's only something that someone on the inside can say that they watch it all happen.
Yeah, it's and I just getting some of the internal politics. I just kind of grew tired of. If I swayed a little bit, or I supported one person, and it would fracture what I thought were friendships, just because of real slight differences of opinion. So,
a completely random question. Are you a hot weather person? Are you someone who likes to just sit inside when the snow is outside falling?
Um, I definitely would prefer to be warm weather, but as a Canadian, I sort of grown accustomed to cold weather and in a great sense. And I mean, I
Because
used
it does get very cold, doesn't it? Like
no,
low minus numbers.
That depends where you are.
Mm.
Now, when I worked for the Department of National Defense, I lived in Winnipeg, and I was Winnipeg has really a reputation for being very, very cold. I know my parents actually lived out there originally, when that's what brought me out there that summer to look for a job. And the Christmases I visited them when I was in university, I was there from about the middle of December till the beginning of the month. I think I was there for 3 or 4 weeks. And I remember the first year there was 2 days it got above minus 27. That's before wind chill factor. One day it was minus 26 and the other day it got up to a balmy minus 24. It's the only place. Incredible. It's the only place I ever lived where the bus shelters actually are heated. People plug in their cars to the block heater so it doesn't freeze, which is a common thing in a lot of areas of Canada. But was the only place I ever lived where they actually, when you went to the mall, they actually had these block heaters that you could plug in at the mall.
Like, I mean, we in Northern Ireland, we like to moan if we're too cold. We like to moan if we're too warm. I mean, when we say cold, we're talking, -3, -5 maybe at the most, and we go outside and have to defrost the car and so on. I cannot begin to imagine trying to get a morning routine, trying to get out to your car at -20.
Yeah, my father, when he lived out there, he actually had, besides the block heater, he had a little, it basically looked like a hairdryer. They plugged in the car and you would start it up. It would start on a timer like at 4 a.m. So he'd be ready the car would be a little bit warm. Luckily, where I live in Canada, where most people live in Canada, is not usually that cold. It's really in the prairies where you get those really deep, high lows, I guess, to say the really deep lows, where you can't expose your skin for too long without risk of frostbite. But where I live in Atlantic Canada, I'd say maybe not quite the same as Northern Ireland, but very similar.
But close.
Part of it influenced because I'm beside the ocean, so salt air and fog does eat up a lot of the snow. But it doesn't really get, if there's a day it's -10 or -20, that's an oddity in the winter. My birthday's June 21st, and I remember living here a few years ago back. There was one day that it was warmer on Christmas Day that year than it was the following year on my birthday. So
yeah. And as for now, then, so I see you've got a kind of mic set up. Are you into podcasting yourself?
I do. I actually have. Like I said earlier, history kind of really can't escape me. I have a podcast where I talk about genealogy, and then I have a YouTube channel where I talk about genealogy, but I also have a couple other YouTube channels where I talk about history and Canadian culture, and geography, and just kind of toying around with a few different niches to see where I really strike. But yeah, my podcast is particularly about Atlantic Canadian genealogy and history.
And that is quite fascinating because you see websites now. I don't know how true some of them are, but where you can track back to see where you came from and track back.
Well, that's interesting. That's actually the name of my podcast, How We Got Here. So it's
right.
And you can. I think in North America, it's really kind of more of an important thing than might be for you, because if I was to ask you your heritage, you'd probably say, well, I'm Irish. My family's lived here. But for me, I know when my ancestors came from Europe over here, and it's trying to figure out where that is and try to make those connections. It was really important to me, especially that is the one thing from moving around a lot when I was younger. Because like I said, when you would ask me where I came from, I would have said, name a year. Or my wife, when we first got married, she'd just say, well, if somebody asked, well, where's he from? She'd just say Canada, right? Very, and she'd say broadly. And I think that's what she'd say to other Canadians, just because I had lived in so many different places. So that's kind of one of the reasons I really got stirred up and interested in genealogy. Combined my love of history to really want to be able to say who I am, like what am I? My parents were both from Nova Scotia, different areas of Nova Scotia, both different background. My dad's family's Irish, my mom's family's Scottish. I used to joke when I was younger, and what that makes me a cheap drunk. But
that would be very true. Very true indeed.
But it was just the idea of really connecting with that, and I really enjoy hearing people's family stories, and that's what my podcast does, is try to share people's stories, so their family, how they arrived where they are today.
So I'm guessing one of the first things that you did when you were first interested is get the whole family tree together. Get it all.
Yeah, I did. I actually was lucky. I had on my mom's side, I had a family tree that somebody on her father's side of the families did back in 1979. And so when I started getting interested, it was about 20 years later. But so a lot of things have been out of date, but it got me to get to a certain point on that line. And then I started investigating. But really a lot of it just actually starting with your own family, finding out what your family actually knows first, and what you know, because it's amazing how you can get back to certain to get a good start. I have had it's been the last 5 years I've really dived in deeply and started doing a lot of research, and I've had wonderful things. My mother's father's mother was my last immigrant ancestor. That she came from Scotland when she was 13 in 1905, and I actually found a recording of that was done for somebody for a university paper or research, because they were researching the people in the industry of coal mining in the little community she was in Cape Breton, and it was probably done about a year before she died, and it was really amazing to go and be able to talk to the archivist there, get them. They didn't have this digitized. They digitized it for me, sent it to me so I could listen to it. And it's really
just the amount of records that must be there when you think about it. It just must be incredible.
It is, except in Ireland. It's really hard when you start digging in Ireland, because a couple things. There was in where a lot of the early records were kept. There was a large fire. I think it was 1895, and then also during the creation of the Republic of Ireland, a lot of the records were destroyed, through bombings. And so it's hard to get a lot of those things. There's some good church records in some areas you can find in Ireland. Like, it gets harder. It depends where it's from.
Yeah, but there's no iCloud of a backup.
No, but there's a lot. There's so much now that is available online. One of the reasons when I was younger, I was interested, but I never really got too far because I couldn't go over to Scotland. I couldn't go over to Ireland and see the records. But now I can go online and find them. I can connect with people. And
have you ever met members? If you've went back and you've kind of found that certain members of your family were there, you find people who were related to you that you didn't know. That kind of way, because that must be such a strange thing if you find it you were related.
I found some people that I found I was related to, that back in history. No, not somebody like, oh, this is a neighbor I had years ago.
Yeah.
But no, I found some people that in history that I had been related to, or or can connect to. Some, I never would have suspected until I really started digging.
And the big thing that some people, shout from the rooftop about is if they find out they're some way related to a celebrity.
I've dug back, and I can actually connect my family. My 25th great grandfather was Henry the Third. But his son Edward Longshanks was my 24th great granduncle, also my 24th great grandfather.
Yeah.
When you get back at that point, there you have your 25th great grandparents. You have 12 million of them. So
that's mind blowing.
In all the British Isles, back in that time, there wasn't 12 million people living. So if you can get back that close to that far, you're related to them, right? And you're related to them multiple times over. So
it's when it starts getting into, third, fourth, fifth, it's just, it's mind blowing the amount of people that are actually there anyway.
Yeah. Like you think about it, you double it. You double your there's one of you, 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great grandparents. It doesn't take long. And it real compiles, and there's a large number. Sort of my goal is to try to get back 8 generations on all my lines, which is still a really large amount of people you're related to. So
yeah, I mean, that's not something you can just go on a Google search and do in a day. I guess that's years.
No, if somebody's done some of the work, that's my line that connected me to Henry III. Luckily, somebody had done a lot of research before, and when you got back to a certain point, there's a lot of documentation. Because this minor noble was mentioned in the book, and that's who you're related to. Then you can find out, their parentages and stuff because it was written about. But for the everyday person, it does get to be a lot harder.
And there's a lot of kind of TV shows about that now. Particularly here in the UK and so on, where celebrities would go on and they would find out, who they're related to. And you've heard of Ant and Dec, right? The presenters.
Yes.
They did a show and they found out they're somewhat related in some kind of way. And it's amazing to watch when they go through the records and they bring out the books where you have to put the gloves on. That's when it gets serious, when you see all of those records. And mind-blowing stuff.
Oh, and that's one of the things I find exciting, even just seeing digital records, seeing a death certificate that the witnessed was my great grandfather. He signed it. So I got to see his signature, somebody I never would have met. I could just those type of things. And you hear a lot of interesting stories and read a lot of death certificates are really interesting to read sometimes, just the causes of death. I have 2 relatives that within 60 years of each other were both killed being crushed by mine cars in the coal mines in Cape Breton, which is not something every day, but it's just to happen twice.
But, and what I do think is you think 2022 and you think years then down this line, and people are going to be looking back and seeing COVID as a thing, and they're going to be seeing all these diseases that are probably might not even be a thing in years to come.
Chances are they won't be, because how many people do you hear get the bubonic plague every year? There's still minor outbreaks in places, but nothing like it had been. So and
they're going to have a lot more of a easier time to try and find the records in years to come now than.
Yeah, but you know what? It's going to be harder. Like, I have pictures of my grandmother. My grandmother died just this year. She was 99. I have a picture here. This is of her when she was which camera am I using? This one. So it's kind of low, but this is her when she was a teenager with her best friend who's still living, and she's also 99. But this was a significant picture. Now, like, people are like, you're going to be looking back. Oh, yeah, he had a lot of cats.
Yes, exactly. There's almost too many pictures. Yeah, incredible.
Where pictures used to be, usually a lot of pictures were of significant events like weddings, funerals. At one time, it was actually, when photography first was starting to be used, it was a very common thing to actually take a picture of the corpse. That it's something we probably wouldn't think of nowadays, but it was something that was done, and it was to preserve that last memory of what the person looked like. But we don't have to. Generations now will probably have to do that because they'll be able to find on TikTok the video of them dancing the day before.
That's
or
so
whatever.
True. That's true. Or X-ray glasses or something, you'll be able to see them. Yeah, incredible. Just give your podcast a wee plug then. What's your podcast called?
It's called How We Got Here.
How We Got Here. Perfect. Well, thanks so much for coming on this podcast. I know totally random, but no, that's very, very interesting.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Glad to speak to you.
Thanks for listening to the podcast, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, and all other podcast platforms. We obviously know that because you're listening. Don't forget to subscribe for weekly updates, and please do leave a review and a rating. All the links are in the description. Until next time.